All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the August Freight Advisory Committee meeting. For the folks joining us online, if you could just drop your name, title, and organization that you represent in the chat. We'll read that out during the introductions. Quick guidelines, please mute your microphone unless you're speaking. If you'd like to speak, just use the raise hand feature and I will call on you. And then for everyone's reference, this meeting is being recorded to YouTube like all of our public meetings are. The agenda today, we've got a pretty quick one. We'll start with welcomes and introductions as always. Then we'll move on to our discussion items. The main thing we'll be talking about today will be the Superload Corridors study that we've been kind of getting going here at the Transportation Council for a little while. We have a draft scope of work for the consultant study that we're hoping to get put out pretty soon. So we'll be reviewing that, getting all your feedback, make sure we're not missing anything as we're moving that forward. Then we have a quick update on our long range plan in most are working on. Adam, can you see if we're plugged in on the laptop? Update on that plan that's still ongoing. Then we have a quick update from Capital District Clean Communities. Yep, perfect. Thank you. Okay. And then just a quick update on the status of our ongoing planning initiatives, where we're at with everything we have going on. We'll then open up the floor for member updates, see what all of you have going on, any exciting news or challenges you're facing, and then just cover the remaining meeting for the year. So start with introductions. You mostly all know me. I'm Ethan Townsend with the Transportation Council. Go this way.
I'm Adam McCarville, also with the Transportation Council.
Valerie Dean with DOT Region 1.
Tom Phelan with VHX Engineering. I'll be here as a member of the public today.
Ted Thompson, member of the public.
Peter Comenzo with Town of Rotterdam.
Martin Hall, Transportation Council.
Rich Hendrick, Port of Albany.
Shinewood, Port of Albany.
Lou Esposito, Supervisor, Punchtown.
John Scavo, down at Brooklyn Park.
All right, and then joining us online, we have Juan Tamani from FHWA, Jim Miracle with Albany County, Jeff Grit-Savage with the Canal Corporation, Megan Daly with the Port, Dave Sawitz with Price Chopper, Erica Beckford with MC Samuels Logistics, Dr. Lawson with the University of Albany, Doug Morris with the Independent Owner Operator Drivers Association, Ryan Riper with the Town of Wilton, Jose, Jose, I can never remember how to say your name, Jose Hulenveris with RPI, and Dave Nelson with Transportation Council, as well as Leah Rye and Parker Morris with Transportation Council, and Greg Bedrosen with GE Vernova. So thank you all for being here today. So we'll just dive right into our discussion items. So we'll start with just a quick overview of the Superload trucking project. We talked about this at the last Freight Advisory Committee meeting, but since then, you know, there's been movement on it. The biggest meeting we had since then was on July 16th. We had a big stakeholder meeting that we kind of redesignated as the Superload Task Force with the Transportation Council. The purpose of that meeting was just to bring together as many stakeholders as we could. So we had DOT, the Thruway, the port, GE, all the municipalities that are involved with this issue to kind of bring it back to everyone's attention because it kind of stalled out for a little bit, and then to determine what the best way for us to actually address this problem is. You know, we at the Transportation Council have limited time and resources to tackle such a large issue like this. And so it was determined that the best path forward would probably be to undertake a consultant-led study to identify not just a route between GE and the port, but to develop a superload network throughout the region, connecting all the manufacturers and facilities, as well as the interstate system and other routes that lead outside of our region, because this superload issue is more than just GE, even though that is the most prominent concern that we're having right now. We had a couple additional focused meetings with some of the people involved. So we met with Dagan Trucking and Schenectady Metroplex on August 7th. We met with DOT staff on August 15th. And based on all those meetings, the consultant study really seems to be supported, and everyone agrees that that is the best way to move forward. So we're still exploring funding options. The Transportation Council is able to fund some of the study, but we are needing to partner with some of our the other folks involved, in this topic to come up with the funding we need to undertake the sort of complete study that we need. So we don't want to do this study, and do it kind of half-assed, pardon my French. We need to do.
That's
Yeah,
professional.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. It's a technical term. We need to do this study in a way that actually solves the issue, both for the products that are being moved right now, but also so that in the future we can attract manufacturers. We want to make our region as enticing to all businesses as possible, and that includes having businesses be able to move their components on our roads. And so as we're exploring those funding options still, we've been drafting a request for proposals for the study, and we're kind of shopping it around right now, making sure that we're not leaving anything out, because like I said, we want it to be as robust as possible. So today we'll go through the main tasks of that study, and just see if anything pops out to people that we've missed. So at any point during this, chime in, folks online, feel free to chime in or leave a comment in the chat. And we'll go into it. So the first task is gonna be pretty simple. We will have, project kickoff meeting with the core project team, which will likely consist of transportation council staff, DOT staff, and the consultant. That'll just be to, get the project going, figure out any sort of administrative, questions that anyone has. We'll then develop the stakeholder and public outreach plan. The stakeholder outreach is going to be a very important part of this. So we want to make sure that we get a complete list of stakeholders who are involved in the project. So, we have the names and affiliations of all the people who are on the Superload Task Force. We know of other manufacturers and shippers throughout the region. But developing a complete list there is going to be very important. And we'll be involving the Superload Task Force at that stage to make sure we're not missing anyone. We'll also have the consultant develop what they anticipate to be included for public outreach activities. Usually with a transportation council study, we do pretty robust public outreach. We have the public involved at many stages, provide feedback. This is not one of our typical linkage studies. This is a really technical, really commercial focused study. Not a lot is going to be done that's going to be impacting people's homes or the way people in their passenger vehicles interact with the roadways. So we anticipate that the public outreach will be less for this project, but we're still going to be including it. So at this point, we're anticipating, having public website, doing, social media updates on the project, and then also having one public, really more of a presentation than a workshop, and definitely not like an open house style meeting where we present the public with probably at the recommendations stage, what we're thinking for the recommendations, and getting feedback on how people feel about the routes we're proposing. We anticipate that people will not be happy if the route goes near their property, but we'll be doing our best to stay away from residential areas and minimize the impact of these plans. Does anyone know of any, or how do people feel about that level of public involvement in the project? Does it seem like we should be doing more, having, multiple rounds of public meetings, or do we think that kind of just that informative approach is better?
I mean, from a, phase perspective, if after the analysis, we see that a route is more residential.
Yep.
Then I would say we will increase the outreach.
Definitely, yeah, that's a good point. We could do kind of focus public outreach depending on the routes that are analyzed. Yeah, that's a good point. So in addition to that stakeholder and public outreach plan, we'll then develop a data collection plan. We have a lot of data internal to the Transportation Council. DOT has a lot of data that we can provide the consultant, but there's still going to be a lot of data that the consultant will need to collect themselves. So developing a plan early on in the study process to make sure that we're not missing anything is going to be very important. That's where we'll have the first study advisory committee meeting. So we're calling it a study advisory committee meeting, but it'll likely be mostly made up of that Superload task force that we convened a couple months ago, because we already have, a group that is very involved with this. Obviously, anyone who was not involved with that Superload task force that's interested in being a part of the study advisory committee for this study, once we get it going, reach out to me and we can make sure that you're incorporated and involved with the project. But that first meeting will be primarily to review that stakeholder and public outreach plan as well as the data collection plan. Like I said, we don't want to miss anything. So it's better that we get it in front of people's eyes early on to make sure that we don't have to go back later and do more data collection or public outreach when we weren't anticipating it.
Ethan, is
Yeah.
there a time frame? I know it's early, but is there a time frame that this study will be completed?
Yeah, so, this sort of study in our research has not really been done before, nationwide, so it's hard for us to estimate that time. We've put roughly in the RFP, that we'd like to see completed within 9 months, but since this is a request for proposals rather than expressions of interest, so we're really leaving it open to the consultant, and we have language in there that says, if you anticipate the timeline being different than that 9 months, include it, and you're not gonna necessarily be penalized if the quality of the work, is if it takes longer, but we get a better product, that's not necessarily going to score you lower. But obviously, we don't want this project to be dragging out for a long time. We want to keep it moving as well as we can. So task 2 is where we get into the data collection and the existing conditions. We expect this to be potentially even the largest piece of the study. The data collection is going to be vitally important for informing our route selection. And so this is where we're going to have those stakeholder meetings. We anticipate a lot of stakeholder meetings because we want, we could do like large meetings with stakeholders, but it's harder in that sort of setting to get the sort of focused feedback that we need from everyone involved. So we anticipate lots of meetings with individual groups and organizations to get as much information as we can. We're also going to want site visits done as a part of this process to, go look at how low is that bridge that these superloads can't make it, rather than just relying on what information can be pulled off reports and stuff, going and doing potentially actually measurements. In the RFP, we have some language that we're encouraging the use of innovative technologies, so anything from drones as pictured here to LiDAR to make like actual physical point cloud maps of constrained locations. This data collection is going to take a significant amount of time because a couple inches can make a route work or not work. This is where we'll also have potentially some of that public engagement. Again, that's really going to be up to that stakeholder and public outreach plan, depending on how it shakes out. We'll also have the consultant do existing conditions report at this phase. So that will include the physical information that is found on the sites, but also a literature review of any other potential studies that have done this. Andrew Tracy and I have done a lot of research to try and find similar studies. We found that Minnesota DOT has a pretty robust superload network. We cannot find any information about how they developed it, just that they have it. And then there are a couple of spots in Canada where they did really focused studies where they were kind of similar to what we have here. They said, we have this manufacturer, we have this port. Here's the route we want to use. Like, how can we make it usable? So it's different the further west you get, because things get wider and flatter, and it's a little easier to move around than our hilly, bridge filled region. But there are other places that have looked at superloads, just not at the level of detail that we have. So including literature review of best practices and other planning efforts will help inform our efforts. Yeah.
Is this just going to be the road network, or are you considering the rail network also?
So we have language in the RFP that all forms of transport should be looked at. So that includes rail, also potentially includes the canal, because that's something that's come up before. We anticipate that the roads are going to be the primary route that are used because, the canal has been used in the past, but there's issues using the canal with the seasonality of it and it being kind of hard to get from GE onto the canal. The rail's also been looked at in the past, and due to the extreme size and even weight of these components, the rail doesn't work right now and might not work for some of the largest stuff GE is planning. So we anticipate it's going to mostly be a road focused study, but we don't want to limit it. So we're trying to keep it open.
Because the first superload project I did was GE Schenectady to the port via CP rail.
Yep.
And it worked now I don't know whether it's still happening, but At that
Okay.
time, it worked.
Yeah, it's just now that the loads coming out of the Schenectady plant are wider. You gotta either,
You can't do the rail anymore?
we're doing it, but there's points where you gotta shut down the other rail.
Yeah.
And like single track or whatever, it makes it tough, and then the stuff we're getting into the port can't even be shipped with the lifting trunnions. They have to be installed at the port because it adds 3 feet to the load. And yeah, it's there's a lot of limitations that, but they are looking at every available, means of transportation.
Hi, this is Greg from GE Vernova. I just want to, as we try to talk about GE Vernova, I think it's important to segment like wind type products that comes out of our renewable side of the factory versus the gas power items, because they're both big, but they're very different and they pose their different challenges. So I just want to sort of level set everybody about that, where gas power, those are the very dense, heavy generators with the lifting trunnions. And then with the wind components, those are your nacelles and your hubs and things like that. And they both have challenges, but they're very different challenges.
Yep. Thanks, Greg, for making that clarification. Yeah, GE Vernova has a lot of different components that they're manufacturing. And we're talking about the largest ones, which are the hardest for us to ship around. And that's why the data collection piece of the study is going to be so important, so we can identify what the size of the products that GE as well as other manufacturers are moving around, to make sure that say one manufacturer needs a 17-foot by 17-foot envelope, and another needs an 18-foot by 16-foot envelope. We need to figure out what the size of all the products that are being moved are, so that we can make appropriate recommendations for the current things that are being manufactured, as well as any future products that need to be delivered.
Hey, Ethan.
Yeah, Leah.
Sorry, I just wanted to let you know there's a couple people who have asked questions in the chat, Jose and Pete.
Great. Yep, so Jose asks, what about the canal? Like I mentioned, we do have language in there to talk about the canal. The canal has been looked at before and has been used for different things in the past. The canal has its own constraints with the fact that it's closed several months out of the year. There are places in Europe that are colder than us that freeze over, that use their canals year round. So that is something that we can look at. But like I mentioned, we anticipate roads are going to be the primary mode, but we don't want to limit it. If it's going to be easier and cheaper to outfit the canal to move these loads, then that is an option. There's also issues with the canal with we have some historic bridges, especially around the Peebles Island area, that are a little short depending on what's being moved. But if the cost of installing bubblers in the canal and lifting a historic bridge is less than lifting 3 or 4 rail bridges, that might be the route that the region ends up going with. But that's why we're doing the study, is to look at all those options and see what's going to work the best. Yeah, Jose?
I want to mention that a while back I was invited by Siemens to see their manufacturing plant that is basically very close to the downside to the downtown Berlin, and basically they took me to this facility. Basically, I'm talking about maybe 5 kilometers from the downtown Berlin. And then they were basically fabricating the blades for the air turbines, and then they had to sleep directly from the factory to the canal. And Germany has, I mean, similar weather on us.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, they talking about the ice, the ice in the river, the canal. I mean, these things that could be addressed, and I saw that with my own eyes.
Yeah,
GE
yeah. the canal-
Vernova does not make blades in Schenectady.
No, I understand, but again, in essence, if we're talking about, I mean, it is a possibility.
Yeah, I think Jose was mentioning another facility that makes blades, that uses the canal. Pete asks, says there was a CFA granted to move items to a new boat slip on the canal across the way from GE plant. It happened around COVID, then disappeared. What about that? That's lock 8, I believe, on the canal. Yeah, I'm not too sure about the specific details about why that's not being used as much. I think I think there's a number of reasons, like we mentioned, with the canal being an issue for year-round access. So it's been more viable to move these things on the road consistently, trying to find routes that work rather than
I can
Go ahead, Greg.
I can also speak to that. The problem is 890. You can't go under 890, and it's not feasible with the current infrastructure there, or would take a lot of 890 infrastructure redesign to go over it, to put like
That
a
makes sense.
flyover. So that's
Yeah.
sort of that's the wall that's broken it, where we can't go over, can't go under.
Makes sense. We got a lot of old interstate infrastructure around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it tough to get around sometimes. But again, this study could indicate that is the best and cheapest, most viable option. And that might be the one that the region ends up progressing. So we'll have to see how the study comes out. But we know there's been a lot of interest in using the canal because, you know, when you're moving things on water, weight becomes a non-issue essentially. So it's a really attractive option if it's possible for us to get it to work.
If
So
I may,
that's-
this is Pete. Can I ask one thing? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead.
The only reason why I asked that was because, I guess it's one of those questions about reinventing the wheel. A CFA was actually issued. Money was actually allocated around 2020. There was actually the talk that was going to actually move forward, that they had found a way to do something under 890. And the only reason why I was asking is, you know, like I said, they something was going to happen, then suddenly it wasn't. And that's why I was just curious, because it sounds like they had at least figured out a plan that would have allowed turbine, the generators, turbines, et cetera, to come out of the plant. It just, you know, like I said, it just because it struck my attention that had been granted and then kind of didn't, stopped.
Yeah, that's a good point, Pete. Like that predates my time with the Transportation Council, so I wasn't involved in the conversations at that time. From what I've talked to former staff and DOT staff about, they were looking at trying to move these across 890 to the port, potentially redesignating certain ramps to be just for these loads or adding new ramps. But for whatever reason at that time, they didn't feel that option was viable, and so that's why it didn't advance at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it could be that is because different things are being produced at GE now than they were even in 2020. So it could be that that ends up being the best option now. And having this study to reinforce that will be helpful, because we can point, if that is the best option, can point, say this is the only way for us to move these products consistently. So the second study advisory committee will be convened at that point, and that'll be to review the data that's been collected and the existing conditions report, and make sure, again, we don't want to miss anything. I'm going to keep saying that over and over, because if we miss something here, it's going to put everything back, or we might make a less than ideal decision, and we don't want that. We want to collect as much information, do the study as well as we can the first time, so that 5 years we're not back at this table saying, how do we move things around the region. We want this to be the study that informs the decisions we make, and so we need to have as many eyes reviewing all the data at each point as we can. So that existing conditions will then feed into the actual concept development and the draft report. So on the right over here, you see this is that Minnesota DOT superload corridor map that I had mentioned earlier. They have a statewide map that shows where superloads are designed to go. It's a little hard to see because the map is small up here, but they're a little squares and little circles that are on those superload routes that are identified barriers. So Minnesota DOT has identified their network, but there are still, some roundabouts, some low bridges that they recognize are barriers, but having them identified on this map means that when that intersection or when that bridge comes up for routine maintenance, repair, replacement, now Minnesota DOT has it identified on this superload network and is able to make sure that any new designs conform with their superload standards, which at the top, I think that they say they're using superloads as 16 tall, 16 wide, 150 long, or 200,000 pounds. So that might not be the definition that we go with here, but that this is kind of a model for what we could potentially see for our region. So we want draft concept routes, candidate routes, kind of how we're referring to them, between the manufacturers and the multimodal facilities. So that's your GEs to your Port of Albany's, that's your Fort Miller precast to the Guilderland rail center, whatever we identify in the region as a superload manufacturers and the regions we're going. We also want to identify those north-south and east-west routes through the region because we have lots of superloads that are being manufactured in the region. We have a lot that are moving through the region. We have rail cars that are going from Plattsburgh to San Francisco. We have things traveling through our region that don't touch the surface roads here, aside from when they can't make it on the interstate. So we need to accommodate those as well because they're also impactful to the local road network. We want, for each of these routes that are identified, each of the candidate routes, we want suites of projects that identify what will need to be done to actually address the constraints. We don't anticipate this study to find a perfectly clear 20 by 20 route with no load posted bridges and no narrow roads. We anticipate that there are going to have to be capital projects or regular maintenance activities that are done along these corridors to make them viable as routes. But we want to know what are going to be the easiest pickups for those routes so that we can develop a quick network so we're not dragging our feet trying to get these products moved around. And it might be that we can have one route that is a 16 by 16 envelope that we could address all the problems within a year. And then we might have a 20 by 20 envelope that's going to take 5, 6, 7 years. So it'd be good to know the size and the projects that are going to be needed to address those so that we can, if we can, pick up some easy wins to get the products that are being moved right now through the region while working towards a larger network that'll allow future development and the largest items to move through unimpeded as well. With those suites of projects, we're anticipating at least some high-level planning cost estimates. It's really going to depend on the funding we have available, as well as potential concept drawings, scopes of work, all that as applicable to the projects. We're not going to need really high-level cost breakdowns and drawings if we just need to move a light pole over 3 or 4 feet. But if we're going to have to redesign an intersection or change the height of a bridge, that's where we're going to need more detail. So it's as applicable. We want that level of detail. This will also be where any final stakeholder outreach, public involvement is going to be conducted. This is where we'll actually have those candidate routes so we can get people's feedback on them. Hopefully, we'll have option A. These move all on highways that are wide and open. Option B, it goes right across your front yard, and we'll have people say, we want option A, not option B. That's kind of the goal, is to show people that we're working to minimize the impacts of these loads while maintaining the economic vitality of the region. So here, is there anything that we're potentially missing as concepts? What are things that we might want to see come out of this study? We'd potentially like to see a superload network like is being proposed there with associated policy recommendations or design standards that could be applied across that corridor. But we're open to other innovative products and outcomes from this study if anyone has anything in mind. And again, this is a request for proposals, so we're hoping that the applicants for the project will have some experience in issues like this and be able to come up with some pretty neat solutions as well. Going once, going twice.
Funding sources?
Yeah, that's a good point. Funding sources will be important for us to identify because as we anticipate, some of the changes are gonna be pretty expensive, you know, it costs a lot to redo a bridge. So funding sources, that is a good one to identify.
I'm not an expert when it comes to
Yeah,
this type of planning.
and neither am I.
None of us.
One of the things that just comes to mind is what's the existing infrastructure under that roadway and how could that be affected? Age probably plays a big role when you're looking at the historical records. And I don't know if these studies would or should consider maybe some strategic borings where there may be questions about the integrity of the weight loads.
Yeah.
I just know you can have a design spec, your record can show one thing, but what gets built, depending on somebody's out there doing construction inspections, be very different municipalities on local road networks, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. We'll see if we can include that, you know, with our planning funds, there's limited sort of engineering surveying work that we're allowed to do per federal highway rules. But that is something we could look at to see how much information we can collect, and then also the goal is to identify multiple candidate routes that move throughout. So if one is identified as the preferred route, then it gets to the actual kind of design engineering work to get it up to a super load spec, and they start doing that field work and realize it's not actually a viable route. Potentially have other candidates that they can pivot to find a more suitable route. So that's definitely something good to keep in mind.
Hey, Ethan,
Yep.
Juvena has asked a question in the chat. You might have already answered it, but I just wanted to direct your attention to it.
Yeah, so sorry, I can never say your name either. Wavena Nye from CHA asks, it appears that the superload corridor will be identified primarily through local demand and pattern. How about potential superload corridor that will be developed in the future? Will this be consideration for the project? And the answer is yes. We want the study to, you know, address the problems we're having right now, the constraints we're having, but we don't want to limit it to what is being manufactured now. We want to identify, you know, where are the areas in the region that are attracting, you know, large manufacturers, and make sure that we're connecting all the intermodal facilities, all the large freight manufacturers to the network. And part of the stakeholder interviews are going to be talking with people to see, you know, if they know that in the next 5, 10, 15 years, they're going to start producing loads that are larger and larger, getting a sense of where those are going to be coming from and where they're going to be going to, so that we can design the network to accommodate future growth, because we want to not only retain our current businesses that are, you know, constrained by these tight roads that we have. We want to be attractive to future development in the region. So yeah, definitely considering that future development and making a holistic network rather than just kind of a quick fix to the issues we're having right now. All right, then the last step of the study is going to be simple. It's just going to be preparing that final report, which will be including the existing conditions, candidate routes, the literature review, wrapping it all up into one pretty digestible report. You know, we anticipate also getting, you know, 1 to 2 page summary as a part of the project that we can easily hand to policymakers, to the public, so that people can really look through what the problem is and what we're recommending, and why it's important. Because the why it's important is something that we constantly need to emphasize, because, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, like, you know, GE can figure it out. Like, they want to manufacture stuff here, like let them deal with it. Like, why is the public being involved with this at all? But manufacturers, businesses like this are the economic lifeblood of our regions, and we need to get everyone on board with supporting our businesses, because without businesses, you know, the transportation network is designed to move people and goods, and we can't forget about that goods part of the transportation network. The final report will obviously include SAC feedback and might have a couple revisions depending on you know, how the report shakes out. And it should also include potential areas for policy change. You know, we can't lobby as a transportation council. We can't take things to elected representatives and say, hey, you should pass this law, but we can identify where there are physical constraints and then where are there the policy constraints, so that folks who are able to make those policy changes can become the champion of those issues and take them on. And then, you know, presentations to groups like the Transportation Council's Planning Committee or the Superload Task Force, you know, larger presentation. We'll just have to see what seems appropriate at the end of the study. So that's the scope of work. It's going to be those 4 tasks. Those middle 2, the existing conditions and concept development, are going to be the bulk of the study. So having heard all that, does anyone have anything stand out to them that they thought was missing? Anything that seemed unnecessary? Taking any feedback. And also, you know, if something occurs to you after this meeting, like I said, we're still exploring those funding options. We don't anticipate putting this out until probably mid-September at the earliest. So you have time if anything comes up to let me know. You know, my contact information you all have, because I invited you to this meeting, and it's also at the end. So feel free to send me any feedback.
And just a question for clarification
Yep.
more than anything else. Is the New York Thruway Authority involved in your advisory committee, or is that done through state DOT?
Yep, so we involved them in the Superload Task Force. They were there. Thruway seems like it'd be a great option. As we're looking at it, there's issues with the Thruway, primarily with the height. They have a lot of low bridges. But we have been including them in conversations. If there's a way to move these things more on the Thruway than they currently are, that would be fantastic. But they'll definitely be involved at all stages.
I guess just clarification too, from the identification of the kind of candidate routes,
Yep.
there is gonna be a level of cost estimation.
Yep,
involved in that.
exactly. Yep. So back in, here in that 4th bullet point under that first bullet point, cost estimates, concept drawings. Yeah, we want to know how much everything's gonna cost. You know, it's great if we can just identify the routes, but if we don't know how much it costs, then it's not.
I do have one item to add too.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so I was actually involved with moving superloads across the interstate to the Lock 8 about 10 years ago now. A critical variable that the study needs to include in addition to height, width, is also time. There was a lot of issues with, you know, shutting down Interstate 890 and it had to be done at like 2:00 in the morning, and bringing superloads through a residential neighborhood during school hours. It's a big variable that you can't overlook, and it creates issues when you try and match it up with the production schedule coming out of the plant.
Yeah,
And all the toll cars and escort vehicles and state police supporting the operation. It's a coordinated event that don't overlook time.
Totally. Yeah, the time's gonna be very, very important. You know, this got brought up first to the Transportation Council's issue because Dagan Trucking mentioned that to one of our board members at a random public meeting that they were taking 3 days to move these things from GE to the port. And so that time piece, you know, is critical. We don't want it to take, you know, weeks to move just a couple of products.
Both length of time.
Yep, and then time of day.
Specific time of day.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, the time is going to be a very critical factor. Especially because, you know, during school seasons, you know, hours are different. Because, you know, there's always stuff going on. So yeah, looking at that time of day is going to be important. That's a good catch, Mike.
Also, getting in out of the port, you've got a lot of constraints there.
Mm-hmm.
Big time. Richie knows that, but there's some significant constraints. That time also becomes an element there. You know, you're shutting down the road. How are you going to tie this into the 787 reimagination project?
Yeah.
That should be included.
Definitely.
You know, if they turn that into a, you know, similar like Cincinnati or something where it's or Green Island, you know, where the traffic goes to a crawl, you're not going to be able to bring superloads through that road.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, that's something we've been talking to DOT about this whole time, has been, you know, whatever happens with 787, like we have to consider the location of the port relative to 787 because we can't be constraining our access to the port. So yeah, definitely we'll be keeping that in mind for the study.
I guess one component that I hadn't really seen, but I could have missed,
Mm-hmm.
was the safety component. If there's a way of, kind of showcasing that even from like a public perspective, you know,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
far
that's-
as what this will do from a safety end.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We have in the larger RFP document, we do have our vision statement, which includes that safety piece. So yeah, didn't include it in the tasks here today, but we'll definitely have a safety through line through the whole thing because, you know, having dedicated routes for these does inherently make it safer than putting them on the local streets. So that's going to be an important piece to highlight, especially during those public meetings. Yep. Cool. Great. Well, we will keep everyone updated as this progresses. Like I said, we don't really have any sort of solid timeline yet, but hopefully in the coming weeks, month or two, we'll have a better idea of if and when this will be moving forward into an actual release RFP. So with that, we'll move on to our next discussion item. Really quick update for our long range in motion plan. We're in the home stretch of this. You know, we've been talking about it for a long time, but on August 6th, we released the full draft plan for public review. August 7th, there was a virtual webinar kind of going over the plan, what's been included, what the process was. And that recording is available on the InMotion Plan website at inmotionplan.org/participate. We are in that final public review phase still, so that's going to run through September 3rd, when the public review period will close. That whole time, the team will be incorporating those comments into the plan because that next day, September 4th, we anticipate that the plan will be adopted by our policy board. Adam, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna, make it very clear that comments can still come in. We're just folding them into the plan so that it's ready for that September 4th deadline. So,
Yeah, we're in crunch mode here on the long range plan. But please review and give us any comments. You know, we want this plan to be as robust as possible. You know, more than just a financial document. We want this to be a comprehensive planning document for the region that'll help guide all our efforts moving forward, including freight.
yeah, I'd say if you're new to this long range plan concept, pretty much the best overview I can give is that this document designates what projects federal money can be spent on, essentially. So that's where the important factor of it is.
Yep. Great, thank you, Adam. If anyone wants any more information, inmotionplan.org is the place to go. Next, turn it back over to Adam for Capital District Clean Communities update.
Sure. So I guess I'll start off with the bad news, right? So the bad news is with the Department of Energy currently kind of in flux in terms of leadership, and since the beginning of the year with the new administration coming in, they've pretty much stopped our contract for Clean Cities until further notice, where it was pretty much in by March 31st was the end of the last fiscal year, so we were able to do some Clean Cities funding based things up until then. But right now, what we're focusing on is taking NPO funds and using those as a driver to keep this program and mission still going until something is figured out, hopefully by 2026 is, well, that's what the Department of Energy staff has let me know. So, things are still going. I'm still keeping projects and ideas across the board, but just wanted to let folks know that that's where we're at with the current federal government decision making. One of the really cool things, I guess we'll go into good news, is that I was able to keep activities flowing a bit. So recently I spoke with Chris Maslick, the Advanced Nuclear Market Development Executive for GE Vernova Hitachi, and we discussed small modular nuclear reactors and the future of that technology. It's actually a little bit more recent in terms of scope than you might think. In Ontario, Canada, they're actually set to build out the first 4 of these in North America. And I'm not entirely certain on all the timeline details for those projects, but when it's all said and done, they'll be able to power around 300,000 Toronto homes, and the technology of their special BWRX modular reactor is about 10% the footprint of a typical boiling water reactor. So that's some pretty good stats on that. And just understanding, from our perspective, like what we can do future wise to plan out for this type of technology is to really begin to think about utility planning and where these interconnections can happen, because from my conversation, it's very clear that it's important to put you want to align power where the actual load is at for efficiency reasons and for planning of what's it called, grid infrastructure. And it's just the length of time that it takes to actually plan out transmission lines and to get that permitting done can also be a very big barrier in these types of projects where there's direct grid interconnection. So when it's very important to be thoughtful about where you're placing the technology. GE Vernova Hitachi is not the decision maker for where the technology is placed, and it's important for municipalities and governments to understand that they do understand their technology and where they may be able to be applied, such as like data centers was one of the heavy points we talked about. But it has to be determined, that there's a logical set spot for them to go. I mean, and that's something that takes a while to really think about. Like you might be able to identify a spot that makes sense, but then you have to factor in the timeline of transmission lines being approved and whatnot. So and also the fact that you need electrical interconnections, fuel interconnections, and water connections for cooling. So while those are just considerations to have, it really is a long-term process. But I think it's really interesting. It's a really interesting technology. The design life currently is around for 60 years or so. What's awesome to me is the fact that it's a constant base load power, or like it's continual and reliable at what they're saying was around mid-90s to high 90s% capacity ability of running, meaning that it's just able to constantly run at that capacity of its output. So I think it'll be a very interesting futurescape technology. And we also have to think about from the freight perspective. While New York right now is not necessarily on the list for this, it's just important to keep those types of technologies and freight shippings in mind, because, while this is something that's meant for areas where you're going to have medium loads or large loads of energy output needed, we have to think about how we're getting all that stuff to those sites and to those places. And I think that's part of that freight system that Ethan's been talking about. So just wanted to give a quick update on that. And then the last item I have is that, so as the Transportation Council, not necessarily as Clean Cities, we've been doing an EV siting tech assist for City of Albany because they're very interested in on-street charging installations, which upstate New York hasn't really gotten heavily into. So this is kind of that same deal of a first of a generation of trying to figure out how we can methodically think about siting from both a mechanical perspective to also a planner's world perspective, meaning, how can we help also include lower income communities in that equation, when right now the trend is that higher income households are most sole owners of EVs and users of EVs at current market rate. So it's just interesting, to include that in there, that, we're thinking about it from a holistic perspective. But I think one of the cool things I want to put together is a panel of experts from other municipalities that have successfully had project case studies happen, where they've been able to successfully implement on-street charging and have it be used and have it be of return on investment. So we're in the early stage of developing that, but I think I want to look out as far as talking with Montreal staff as well as other places in the world that might have successful models that, but then also within the US, that way we can really get into the policy aspects deeper. But I think a panel would be a good idea, because then we could have experts speak out on their case examples, and then have a forum of attendees that would be able to comment and ask questions from municipalities, so that they could maybe talk about, coming of age timelines of getting EV infrastructure installed. Oh, yes.
Are you intending to include rental car companies when you talk about EV charging? The reason I say this is I'm working part-time for Hertz Car Rental, and they have, for example, at the airport, the high, I don't know what the correct expression, but the fast charging
Oh, yeah,
units.
yeah, level 3, yeah.
At their airport, not at the airport, but at their car location. So hopefully you include rental car companies in your talks
Okay, I think that'd be a good idea for a stakeholder, yeah.
for, as I say, for stakeholders.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, that's a good idea, and that's actually another really good angle too, is like. Identifying what fleets of EVs currently exist in the area. I mean, I actually have not been able to find many resources that really show that. Like, we don't have any documents that show an overview of where the general fleets are at. So that's another starter point for this vision, yeah. Thank you.
This footnote, you need not quote me, we're gradually getting rid of our Teslas, but we have a bunch of the other ones. And I have got my own feelings about Teslas, but we won't get into that.
Well, I do appreciate your thought, thank you.
Your point too of the modular nuclear reactors is, from a New York perspective, you could see the climate's kind of changing as far as the appetite and kind of leaning in towards nuclear. And it'll be interesting to see how Micron development site plays a role in what type of energy feeds that. And I know the port, from previous conversations are getting involved in potential, transportation of materials, construction materials from the port to Syracuse, so that could be, hopefully if nuclear is an option there, might play a role in that, so.
Yeah, I think, like to your point, it's about kind of prepping it so that in case it does happen, it's ready to go. I mean, essentially, it's just kind of that plug and play mindset that, we might not be using it right now, but we sure as hell should be ready for when it's in progress.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Last thing we have from me today is just the update on all our planning initiatives. So we have one of our studies just recently wrapped up, Village of Voorheesville Safe Streets Policy and Plan. Village of Voorheesville was having issues with tractor trailers trying to drive under a low bridge. So that was one of the aspects of that plan, that they have made some recommendations to hopefully adjust signage, adjust posting to try and make it so that they're not having as many trucks get to that bridge and then have to do crazy turns, and then maybe redesign the area right in front of that bridge so that when it does inevitably happen, trucks will be able to turn around a little easier. We have two studies that are just about to wrap up. That's the Broadway Resilient Broadway Multimodal Corridor Study across Albany County along Route 32, and Central Ave West Corridor Study in the town of Colony. Those are both anticipated to complete this month. The County Route 109 in Saratoga County and the Route 7 Corridor Study in Niskayuna are both underway. The consultant team, they're working on recommendations and existing conditions for those two studies. Those are anticipated to hopefully complete early next year, but timelines always shift. And then our two newer studies that were added in our most recent UPWP update, the Village of Ballston Spas and City of Saratoga Springs studies, are both really kind of getting going now. Martin's been working on the REIs for those studies, so hopefully we'll have those out soon, and those studies will get underway. For our technical assistance program, our first three projects are being led by Andrew in the town of North Greenbush, City of Rensselaer, and town of Ballston have all been wrapped up. Maybe potential presentations left to be done for those, but the actual work for those tech assists have been finished. The City of Cohoes parking study is also wrapping up, anticipated to be completed this month. And then the Albany County Active Transportation Technical Assist Program on focusing in the Russell Road area in the City of Albany and around the airport area up here in town Colony is getting underway. We're hoping to have that REI out in the next couple weeks. So that's moving along pretty well. Then for our larger updates, we just had the update on the in-motion plan that's anticipated to be completed this year, or not this year, this next month, hopefully this year.
Oh, sure.
The 378 Pell study is still ongoing. Our staff involvement with that has been pretty limited, but we're providing support to DOT wherever we're available. Hopefully that one will be done soon. It'd be great to get get a plan for that 378 bridge, especially related to freight. That's one of the heaviest capacity bridges in the region, our trucking partners are using that sometime to move GE products across the river for storage while they're waiting for the orders to be fulfilled. The ADA self-transition plans throughout the region, the town of Wilton just recently adopted theirs, and the Albany County contract was signed and is getting going on their ADA transition plan. Reimagine 787, which came up earlier, you know, the plan has been released and DOT is moving forward with the next stage of the 787 process, which is that environmental impact statement process. That's going to take a little bit of time, but it is ongoing. And Valerie, do you want to have anything to say about 787?
I don't have too much specific, but the governor released the final report recently, so you may have seen that on the news.
Yeah.
And as Ethan said, we're moving forward into the environmental impact statement phase.
Awesome. Then our Vision Zero Safety Action Plan here at the Transportation Council, that's also anticipated to be adopted at our September policy board. So then we'll be able to move forward actually implementing some of those safety improvements. We set aside money in the most recent TIP update for that. So hopefully we'll be able to start making some of those on the ground changes that are recommended in that plan. And then finally, the I-890 exit 4C Pell study, which Guadam actually mentioned a comment that I missed earlier when they were chatting when we were talking about the superload study. You know, that Pell study is something that's going to impact how these superloads move through the region, because they're looking at exit 4C and how to adjust it for pedestrian, or not pedestrian, but personal vehicle traffic, but it's going to impact how these superloads get out of Vernova. So Transportation Council's involvement with that study has also been fairly limited, but we're providing comments at all stages and feedback whenever we are asked to provide that feedback. So that is all of the updates from the Transportation Council. Now I'll open the floor up to everyone else for member updates. If anyone's having any issues they've run into lately, any areas you think we should be looking, if it's not impacting you, any presentations about freight stuff you've heard interesting lately. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
That's, is there anything gonna be done about the Route 7 corridor by the Interstate 88 and the junction of Interstate 88 and 90? I understand we have, I know we have a BJ's going in over there across from Shelmont, and I see our planner is here from Rotterdam.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be, and you're selling fuel there, they're gonna be selling fuel. Well, this is gonna have a huge impact on trucking.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the reason why. Truckers look at where the cheapest fuel is, and BJ's sells the cheapest fuel. So now you're gonna be bringing more trucks into the area. And when they look at where the pilot is, they're gonna be thinking that they can get fuel there, drive across the road, and get a place to park. That's nothing is farther from the truth. That is like a peanut stand, that pilot there.
Gotcha.
And you're gonna have and I don't blame planning boards, because I deal with ours, and they have no concept of trucking, and not to criticize you, but Rotterdam, because we do have an excellent rapport with Rotterdam being our neighbor, but they just don't take into consideration truck parking and the way truckers think.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be bringing these all in. DOT has chased the trucks away from parking on the highway, Route 7, which is a state highway. They've chased them away from there. You can't park in the industrial park. I don't know if Gold's Price Chopper still lets them in for early arriving trucks, but now you're gonna impact the area with more trucks coming in with no place for them to park. And planning boards just don't think about that when they're doing their planning. Now, I don't know what where the traffic light is gonna be there to let them in, but you got Shelmont across from it, the high school. You've got that, the intersection there from 88 and Interstate 90. You've got, in our town, which is right across from the pilot, we got the Crossroads School for Autistic Children. 200 teachers are in there right now, plus buses coming in there. And it's high school down the road. This is gonna be a huge impact on the area.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody should be looking at this.
So
And-
let me just level set the conversation to ask a question. So there's a BJ's going in and it's going to have fuel islands with dual side pumps for tractor trailers. You don't need to be a BJ's member and you can fuel with Comdata there or something, or Comdata card or something.
I think
Or are
you
we
have to
talking
be a
about,
member.
are we talking about passenger car membership fueling?
Passenger vehicles only, it's
So, so
And you wouldn't
the,
be able to get a tractor trailer in there.
Do you have diesel fuel there?
There is a diesel pump, yeah.
Well, yeah, then you're gonna get trucks in there.
don't you have to be a
No
BJ's
question
member?
about that. You're gonna have trucks going in there. There's no question about that. You're not gonna be able to stop it, just like Sam's does over in Latham. I don't know how you're gonna stop that. Whether it's a straight truck, whether it's a tractor trailer, they're gonna be going in there because they sell the cheapest fuel. And if you're a member, which I happen to be a member, I know what it's gonna be like. It's gonna have a huge impact on the area with more trucks. Like I said, you got the industrial park, you've got the GPS routes you through that area to go to Voorheesville Industrial Park. You've got the distribution center for Price Chopper, Market 32. And it's just gonna have a big impact on it. And I can't see anything else being done about this. We talk about all of these other corridors that are important. This is an important
But
thing.
don't you have to be a member to fuel there? So that we have truck, if you have somebody that works for like, I don't know, for JB Hunt or something, they're gonna use their own personal credit card and their BJ's membership.
Well, I don't know about
I don't know. I mean, I
trucking
ran the fuel program at a trucking company for a long time and I could see maybe like an owner operator doing that. I think we have somebody from that represents owner operators here. That's if they were a BJ's member and we're gonna fuel there and weren't part of another network fuel program through Comdata or bought through a larger group. I understand your concern. I don't see it because most companies, the large ones, they have a fuel network, they have contracts.
I know,
for
they do, I know
right.
they do cost plus 4 or whatever. I understand all of that. But I'm just saying for the owner operator, the private individual, what's gonna be putting, the reason that BJ's is moving out of the location they're in right now is because they couldn't put fuel islands in there and they're coming up there. It's gonna have a big impact. Is there gonna be a light there to have access to them getting in and out of there? No light.
It's too close to the interstate.
It's just, I've been saying this for years, planning boards, and not to criticize the other planning boards, but I've been saying this for years, they don't take into consideration truck parking or truckers, because most of the people are on planning boards are not truckers.
Yeah, the truck parking is definitely a big issue in this region. We just did that truck parking study a couple of years ago. So this is the first I've heard about the BJ's. I'm not plugged into that area of the region personally, but I'll definitely look into it and see the plans. Peter, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Other than obviously, during the review process, we went through a traffic study done by VHB. Have a DLT several times, worked on all the different configurations for the access point and where it's located at, and also looked at the design interior. There's not gonna be trucks going in there. It's not designed for it. It's not gonna be permitted, so. Just a general suggestion, but one of the things, again, I'm a traffic engineer, but I actually used to work for VHB. I want to talk to you about how we worked. I know these folks pretty well, maybe not upstate, but when I worked in the New York City environment, one of the things New York City does very well in their planning, their zoning, the various application process, anytime they have a development approval process, they do not accept standard trip generation rates for their traffic studies. You have to actually go out and collect hard data from comparable sites in the city to demonstrate that because a lot of this is pedestrian traffic more so than vehicular traffic. So you have to do pedestrian impact analyses too for stairwells and subway access and all. One of the things I would suggest is that if you get your ear into your own planning board, get the ear of your own planning board, folks, I would suggest collecting data at other existing BJ's locations or Costco locations similar to that in the region, just to get a sense of how much diesel fuel they're selling in terms of vehicular access. Are these box trucks that they're selling to? Is it off-road diesel, type of vehicles that where they're selling the fuel? Just to gather yourself a little body of data that you could use to help make that case. Because until it happens the first time, most municipalities, it's not gonna show up in a traffic study because it's a unique case. So I would suggest maybe if you can figure out a way with your municipal officials to find a BJ's or a number of these in the region or similar, retail clubs like this. And then just do the data collection yourself and so you're better prepared to come and say, well, this is what we found at this location. How many tractor trailers come in? How many box trucks come in? But is that site that you're proposing configured well to accommodate that?
You could almost get that from the average number of gallons per transaction on diesel. That's gonna tell you real quick.
Right, but if I'm an outsider, I'm not gonna necessarily know that. I
Right.
would have to observe this.
But
yeah.
us as insiders would know that.
Yes.
That almost instantly, whether it's a light duty commercial vehicle like a pickup truck versus a box
Right.
truck. Is a tractor trailer with two twin 125s or 150s on it.
Yeah.
Erica,
Can I make a comment? This is Doug Morse from Owner Operator
Yeah.
Independent Driver Association.
go
Yeah,
ahead,
so,
Doug.
so this recipe is 100% correct. You're 95% of the industry is 10 trucks or less. They're going to buy diesel fuel from the cheapest place around anywhere. And a lot of these planning commissions, they don't take in consideration how many trucks will be coming in there as a result of buildings and these shopping centers put up. And a lot of times we'll put these roundabouts in there, and these are, it amazes me that the last thing they think about when they do these plannings is, who's delivering all these goods and services into this area? It's trucks. That's the last thing I think about. Where's these trucks going to go when they get done delivering? When they're out of hours? We don't know. We're just worried about what the place looks like and the bike trails and this, that, and the other. The last thing they think about is trucks and who delivers the stuff. Where's these trucks coming from? Where are they going? How they get in there? Is the roads and shoulders wide enough? Yada yada yada. It amazes me. The last thing y'all think about is trucks.
Yeah, that's a good point, Doug. Yeah, that's kind of the purpose of this group, is to make sure that we're including these truck considerations in our plan. Yeah. Erica with MC Samuels Logistics had a comment. She said, our owner operators wouldn't fuel there because it's not a lot of trucks going there, so the diesel is sitting, so it may be cheaper. But the fuel that sits is not as good for the trucks. So that's just another comment. Peter,
That's ridiculous. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Peter, you mentioned that trucks won't be permitted to fuel there. Do you know if there's?
It did come up during the conversations.
Yeah, do you know if there's plans to like signage to indicate that they won't be allowed to fuel there or anything on site?
I don't think it'd be the way,
But
take a look at the
design.
colony and the queuing, the way the thing is set up, you'd have a very difficult time to get in and out of there. There is a separate area where they're making the deliveries for the fuel. And then the club sits separate from the satellite fueling island, but that whole corridor where it's set up, I think, is definitely geared towards
geometry.
Yeah, the geometry is geared towards automobiles.
Gotcha.
Getting in and out and avoiding, part of the discussion was really, I don't know if you've ever been to the BJ's here in Colony and the queuing that happens there. Was kind of to direct it away from the store and to make it a separate entity and to also shrink the footprint of it where it's not, I don't foresee there being trucks.
Makes sense.
I know I'm gonna fuel there, cause I just take my tractor and go over there. I live right around the corner.
Yeah, if you had a tractor with just a cab, I mean, I don't see 52-footer navigating that very easily.
Yeah, makes sense.
We'll see.
We'll see. All right, does anyone else have any?
Just a couple things. I want to mention that since we recently brought to light this heavy, high and wide movement. There's been a lot of forward progress working with everybody. We're getting 1 to 2 loads a day now, where it was 1 a month because of delay. So thank you for all the work you've done to move this along with the Transportation Council. October 15th, the port this year is gonna do something a little different. We've in the past had a port industry day where we've concentrated on right in the port, what's going on. We're gonna move it this year to the Capitol Center and just change it up a little bit, but our keynote is gonna be from the President and CEO of the American Association of Port Authorities, talking on international trade, tariff impacts. We've got a still uncommitted invite out to the U.S. Trade Representative to be on a panel speaking about all international, shipping and that. And even though Albany is a small port, you can see right now there's a ship sitting at the dock that's going to Australia. Scrap ship that left on Monday was going to Turkey. So people don't realize there's a lot of international impact on what we're doing. So the schedule for October 15th, invites will be going out soon, and it's one of the few port industry days in the country that are free to attend. You go to the ones in New York and it's like $175 to attend it. Here we just open it up to the public to come and see what's going on.
Well, keep us posted on that.
Yeah.
Quick question of port. With Hertz Car Rental, I'm running to Pittsfield back and forth a number of times, and what we often see are super large bridge beams coming out of Dalton. Are they coming to the port and being shipped out of the port that you're aware of, or you haven't seen them?
No, the ones you're seeing like on the Mass Pike and that?
No, Route 20, coming past Lebanon Valley Speedway, coming in from Dalton, Mass. They come down that hill and into Lebanon, and then they kind of disappear. I'm curious when they come to the port.
Oh, they're not coming down through there,
I'm just curious.
Yeah, as a part of this, we've been talking with some of the manufacturers for those precast concrete parts, and a lot of them are just going directly to the job sites on trucks.
Cause they stop right at the hill where the Mass Pike police drop off, no, the Massachusetts police drop off, and the New York State police pick them up at the top of the hill above Lebanon. And then they come on down but where they come on this side, I'm just curious.
That says something about the way a supply chain works for these unusual loads. Is that if you have to put it on a truck at one end or both ends, it often makes more sense to transport it the entire length, even if you figure there's a way to save money and transport it by a lower cost, lower impact method than that. I'm thinking that's a classic example of one. I've never heard of a case where a concrete beam that's often designed partially to be transported, that it's under different loads while it's being transported than it is while it's sitting in place because of the way it's supported. That I've never heard of a case where there's an intermediate step in that supply chain other than from the place where it's fabricated to the place where it's getting dropped into onto a bridge structure. But you have to follow it. Next time you're out. You'll learn.
A lot of things.
That's where I learned half of what I know about the supply chain.
Exactly.
You gotta follow the Lord.
Awesome. All right. Well, if no one has anything else, our last meeting for the year is gonna be on November 19th, also 9:30 here in our offices and on Zoom. So hope to see you all there. Thank you all for coming today.
Thanks.